Here we go. Is everybody comfortable? I know it's kind of compact in here, but, Brian did tell me if he didn't fill the room, he was going to leave.
No, no. My agent told him that. It was not me at all.
Yes. All right. Well, a couple of things first. First, thank you very much. I'm Tony Polizzi. I'm the director of Startup Grind Denver. And I got this job because of my partner who sent it to me and said, you should apply for this. So I did, and I got it. So this is a kind of the giving part, if you will, for us at least, and for the people that are helping out tonight. So I want to acknowledge initially, well, first, thank you for coming again. Some of the people that are helping tonight that I'll mention again at the end. But they're all volunteers here. So the wonderful folks here running the cameras are from Warren Tech, which is a school in Jefferson County. Am I saying that right, guys? Okay, cool. So give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Great. Then we have Noble Productions. We have Michael in the back, and they're doing the audio. And they do big events and all that kind of stuff for large companies and small companies and catering and all kinds of different things. And I coerced my neighbor, he's my neighbor that lives behind me, Stuart, to do this. And he said he would. So he graciously said, I'll send Michael here. And so here he is. So thank you, guys. And then the other folks that are here tonight, my partner, Eric Dorset. We have Liana Orenstein, who's around here, Liana, right there. And she's helping out. And then my wonderful girls who are out in the front, who I think you all met, Megan and Mallory. And they're here because I forced them to be here as well. But they were actually pretty happy to be here, to be honest with you. They're pretty excited. Although, if you met Mallory, she probably didn't say anything. She's scared to death, so don't worry about it. So anyways, we had it here. We were going to have it another place, but I hope this works out. It looks like it's working out well. Did everybody get everything, eat, and all that kind of stuff? Cool. Thank you so much. So anyways, so for those of you who don't, I'm sure you probably read it, but I'm going to say it again. Startup Grind's been around for a while. It's sponsored by Google for Entrepreneurs. It was started in Silicon Valley and by some folks out there, a couple of folks, Derek and Francisco and a couple other guys and gals. And they do these fireside chats, and that's what we're going to do tonight with Brian. And so we have it. They have it in about 50-plus cities, 20-plus countries around the globe. And we're having, if you want to show up to our big event, it's in February, 2nd through the 5th, if you've seen that. We have, I don't know, hundreds of speakers from all over, and some of the directors from all over will be there, from like Tel Aviv and places in Barcelona, Spain, and Caracas, and all kinds of different places, as well as the United States and Denver. So I will be there, and Eric's going to be there. The other person who isn't here tonight who's helped me out is Colleen Cosme, and she'll be here at the next events that are coming up. So we're doing the typical events. It's going to be the second Thursday of the month. So the next three are for February, March, and April are scheduled. So we have basically Pete Hudson from iTriage next month on the 13th. And then we have Patrick Quinlan from Conversant on March 13th. And then we have Mark Guinea from Cloud Elements in April on the 10th. And more to come. So hopefully you'll enjoy yourself tonight. And you'll say, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to tell every friend I know and every person I meet. That would be great. And if you have somebody that you want to be part of this, to be a speaker or whatever, please let me or Colleen know, and we'll do our best to get them to be here. And if you want to help, we can always use help. So and if you want to sponsor, you can sponsor as well. So anyways, without any further ado here, I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Brian. So I'm going to read this, Brian.
Please.
Okay. Not word for word, but close. So Brian is the CEO of Ibotta. And basically, Brian was prior to Ibotta, and we'll talk a little bit about that whole story. He was a partner in a law firm here in town, right? Mm-hmm. And he also clerked for Justice David Souter for the U.S. Supreme Court, so that's why I'm shaking. Scares the death out of me for that. No, I was kidding. So anyways, he's a graduate of Harvard, Oxford, and Yale, and is on the Board Association for Marshall Scholars. So everybody welcome Bryan Leach from Ibotta.
Thanks for having me.
Sweet. I was going to introduce your wife and kids
Yes,
too,
my
so.
wife and my two daughters are here,
Yep.
Sydney and Sky,
Yes.
and Jen. And thanks, Tony, and the rest of the group, everyone who's here helping support the event. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the chance.
Thank you so much. So, again, thanks for showing up, Bryan. I've talked to Bryan before a couple times, I think. We met a while back, and we had another event where we had a chance to talk at a really cool place downtown, a little coffee shop. So I want to start out tonight just by giving me kind of a background. You know, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? Some of the history behind Bryan.
Yes, great. Well, it's nice to see all of you. I was born in Africa, as I'm sure all of you intuited. I'm African American. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. I grew up for a few years in Africa. My parents both spent most of their childhoods there. I grew up in the household of another entrepreneur, my father, who left his safe and secure job when he had 2 young kids to go start a technology company called Harbinger, which originally was 6 employees and then grew to over 1,400 employees in the course of the next 15 years. I did that growing up in Atlanta, Georgia. So we got from Africa to New England to Atlanta. I won't bore you, but I worked at Harbinger from literally the mailroom, the production room, to marketing and sales and data analysis, data entry, all of the jobs that you could do as the boss's son and so forth. But enjoyed seeing something be created from the ground up. At that point, I got cut from the basketball team around 8th grade and decided that I would take refuge on the debate team and in acting. So I got into public speaking, and I fancied the idea of becoming a trial lawyer one day. I thought it would be fun to be like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men. No one really told me that that's about 1/10 of 1% of actual practicing of law. But I went off to college. I met my wife my 3rd week of college at Harvard in a play, Dangerous Liaisons. We've been together 17 years ever since.
Does that mean something more?
Yeah.
Than okay.
Well, she was a senior. I was a freshman, so it was pretty dangerous.
Okay.
Liaison. That was a big deal and probably my proudest accomplishment to this day.
Okay. Okay, there's the answer to that question, by the
Yeah,
way. So
yeah.
we can
Knock
check
that one
out,
out. It was
but-
not even close, really. So after college, I ran out of good ideas, and so you do what other people do, which is try to delay having to make a real decision about your career, which for me meant applying to law school, of course, and also applying for overseas scholarships. So I went and did 2 years and studied economic history at Oxford. My father's British. My family live over there. I always wanted to see what it felt like to go over there. I had a wonderful experience being there. Came back, went to law school, spent a couple years after law school, as you mentioned, working for federal judges and really learning how to write, learning how to exercise some form of judgment. I was the 16th person interviewed to clerk for Justice David Souter. There are only 4 spots for each of the 9 justices. So there's only 36 of those jobs a year, and I was pretty darn lucky to get interviewed. First question in the interview was, have you ever driven under the influence of alcohol? Which is a very intimidating question to be asked by a United States Supreme Court justice. But it was the beginning of a conversation.
So
about,
more so than your parents?
Yeah, it was.
Okay,
It was. Yeah. So basically, he wanted to know, whether I had committed any of the crimes that I had prosecuted when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Anyway, had a wonderful year with Justice Souter. Came out to Denver, started practicing law at a firm here called Bartlett Beck, and started to find myself building things. In other words, I was restless with practicing law. I wasn't trying cases nearly enough. And so I would start fiddling with the website. And, we really should overhaul the website. And we should market this place differently. And we should change the way we have this sales deck going out. And, I'd like to go on these trips with the founders and try to sell new business. And okay, all right. And then I would find myself saying, I want to start a whole new part of the firm. Let's do international practice. And they're looking at me like, okay, you're in Denver. You don't speak another language. Sure, let's start international practice.
But you were born in Africa.
Right,
so,
right.
You can always tell that, right?
And so I wanted to do something that no one else had done, and pretty soon it became clear that I enjoyed building the practice more than practicing the practice. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to keep selling, because selling was what I liked about being a trial lawyer, is the sales. And then it dawned on me, oh, wait, I actually like sales, not law. And I actually like building products more than service-oriented businesses. And when I started to really think about who my mentors were in the law, they were all entrepreneurs who I admired because of their pioneering status, not because of their legal acumen. And so I came home to my wife one day, and I essentially had a quarter life, midlife pre-crisis, and essentially admitted to myself for the first time that I was gonna regret it if I stayed practicing law. I had just made partner at the firm. I liked my colleagues. I liked the law, but I needed to do something else, and that's how the germ of the idea of Ibotta got started.
Cool. That's awesome. So in that story there, when you're kind of thinking about that, what were some? And you mentioned a couple things I want to touch on. One was you had this process you went through, and you kind of had this debate in your mind, I'm assuming, and saying, wow, law is this, and I think you had mentioned to me one before. You said, and I'm a kind of paraphrase here. You had your life pretty much planned out for the next 80 years. I think that's what you told me.
Measured out in coffee.
Measured
spoons,
out.
I probably
Boom,
said,
boom, 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 boom. Right. So what, through that process, you was it like, oh wow, I think I need this, and then what did you do? Kind of explain a little bit more about that debate in your head. Should I do this or do that? And what were some of the things that triggered you to go to that next stage?
Well, as my wife recalls, probably more vividly than anyone else, I went through what can only be described as a manic cycling of different business ideas. So I would come up with a business idea, I would get really excited about it, and then I would discover that there were 8 other companies doing it already. Or I would get really excited about it, and then I would discover that there's no business model there. Or I'd get really excited about it, and then I would lose focus on it because I got more excited about something else. And so I went through this kind of creative destruction process, and all along the way, I kind of just started to hone and triangulate around the ideas that would become our business. And I had a couple of watershed moments. One of them, I have a very close friend who I had known at Oxford, who was coming to town, and he was arriving at DIA at around 11 or 12 at night. And I just had this intuition that I needed to talk to him. I need to get his advice on what to do. And so I actually picked him up at the airport and drove him to the Westin downtown. At this point, it's 1 in the morning. And I laid out the entire business idea for him, and I thought, now he'll tell me what he thinks. And he said, you need to get on an airplane, you need to go to Silicon Valley, you need to talk to Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn and PayPal and so forth. And I know him, and I'll facilitate that, and I can get you in front of these 5 guys, Andreessen, I can get you in front of Hoffman, I can get you in front of you just need to go. And I said, whoa, I'm not ready to share this with somebody who can tell me all the reasons why it's going to fail. This is just an idea, buddy, back off. And I talked to Jen about it, and Jen, I think, was sort of the mindset, you've never had any experience as an entrepreneur. We were talking about spending our life savings on this, which is kind of a big deal. Why don't you talk to some people that actually know, if this has any prospects of going? I think it's a great idea. I think you should go out to Silicon Valley and kind of road test this thing. And I had a longtime family friend through Jen's family, whose name is Larry Sonsini, who's really one of my heroes and mentors. Larry created Silicon Valley. It's not an exaggeration to say he and a few other people really created it. He certainly created legal Silicon Valley. He represented Steve Jobs for 15 years. He represented the founders of Google. He took both those companies public. He took Twitter public, 2 months ago, or whatever it was. And he was my mentor as a lawyer. And so I was able to go schedule a meeting with Larry on July 3rd, 2011. And I was deathly afraid of Larry telling me this is not a goer. And I get into his office, and I have no deck. I have no financial plan. I'm not fundraising. I just have this 1-page executive summary and this quick bullet summary. And I tell him this scenario. He says, well, I don't know what your idea is, but you just made partner, and you like your practice, and you've got total autonomy, and you're getting to travel the world, and you probably ought to just save some money for a few years, and then you can do your crazy idea then. But let's hear your wild idea. And I lay out the idea for about 2.5 minutes, and he pauses and he says, no, you need to quit now and do this thing right now. How much money do you think you need? And I was like, why, $700,000? I'm sure it would be plenty. That's got to be enough. He's like,
$1 million.
well, if we get you $1 million,
Yeah?
you think you could start it? And I said, sure. And he said, okay, well, I'm in. I got a few friends, but we'll get that together for you. And I said, well, I have this debt. I've got to pay off this debt, and borrowed money coming out of law school, and I got to figure that. He said, well, collect your bonus at the end of the year, set a target for yourself of how much money you want to raise, and then the thing he said that stuck with me the most, he said, you know what? If this doesn't work out, don't worry about it. We'll do something else together. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. So I go out of his office, and I call my wife, and I said to Jen, Larry, I think, just volunteered to put $1 million into this piece of paper idea that I have. And I think I just told him that if that happens, that I'm going to quit my job as a lawyer. And she said, great. Let's hope that happens. And so, to her great credit, she was, once it passed the Larry test, which is kind of a big deal, she was good with it. And then because Larry was on board, we were able to raise a bunch of other money. And there's a lot of other steps in that process. But I guess whether I knew it or not, I basically committed to jump off the diving board that day in his office. It wouldn't be actually today is the exact 2-year anniversary of my first day on the payroll of Ibotta. I quit as a lawyer 2 years and 1 day ago, and 2 years to this day, I started in the front room in my house.
That was a fitting time to be here.
It is.
That's
It
awesome.
is.
Okay, well that's an amazing story. I think that's really, I think when you explained that to me a while back, I was like, wow, that's really kind of cool. I mean, how often does that happen? So you're sitting there in the office.
Mm-hmm.
He tells you that, and these things are probably racing through your head.
Yeah, I called my best friend. And I said, "Do you think this is really going to happen?" He said, "Sounds like it." Whoa, And I then lived a double life for the next 8 months. I lived in utter panic that my law partners would find out about my other life, because I still had to go raise this money. So I had to fly to New York and Atlanta and San Francisco without explaining that I was plotting my escape, and I had to bill hours and report my honest hours. And it's actually shocking. You can underreport your hours to an incredible degree before the managing partner notices. But I would literally have to stay in different hotels because I'd be getting on the same flight as my law partners. And I'm like, oh God, if they see me, there's no explanation for why I'm not, not on business. So this is crazy. At this point, I was trying cases overseas. I tried a case in Singapore that December. I tried a case in Beijing. And while I was in Beijing, I was running off at lunch breaks talking to investors. It was nuts. The two life thing. I was writing briefs, trying cases, and at the same time, I was learning about this industry and like feverishly trying to kind of get a private PhD on the consumer packaged goods and retail markets. And at the same time, I was deathly afraid we're not going to get $1 million. It became clear to me we needed more than $1 million. And then I quit, and I went to drive. I'll never forget. I drove up to tell Fred Bartlett, the founder of Bartlett Beck, one of my mentors. I drove up to tell him first, January 1, 2012, and I'm rehearsing the entire time up to Vail. Oh, man, then he's going to say this, and he's going to say, I brought you out here, I trained you, I gave you this big signing bonus, and now you're ditching. And I walk into his house. This guy, by the way, is a complete and utter legend. He's 76 years old, still skis the back bowls, represented George Bush in Bush versus Gore as the greatest living trial lawyer in the United States. It's not really controversial. Fred Bartlett, larger than life figure, quit his old law firm at age 63 to start a new law firm. It's probably the most profitable law firm in the U.S. The guy's a god in my world. I walk into his house. He says, because I had said I need to talk to you. He said, can it wait? No. So I walk into his house after the drive, and he says, stop. I already know why you're here. I'm sure you're starting something and has nothing to do with the law. Am I close? I said, yep. I said, well, what's the idea? I tell him the business. He goes, great, I'm in. I want to invest. And Lanny Martin, my best friend, you may have heard of him. He's a billionaire or whatever. I'm gonna make sure he does too. And then all the managing partners of the firm, or the founding partners of the firm, and my law partners, to my utter shock, instead of being upset, they all put money in, and we went from $1.25 million to $3 million in 2 weeks. It was awesome. Yeah, it was a great awesome. 2 weeks. Yeah,
that's a great 2 weeks. Yeah. So I was going to ask that question. What was the greatest week? Well, I know what the greatest 2 weeks were. So
that wasn't the greatest 2 weeks. That was just the greatest.
That's from that point,
from the very beginning. But
cool.
Anyway, that's how we got started, and that was a little more than 2 years ago.
Okay, so during that process of looking at how much money I need going through your mind. What do I need to do? What's next? Step 2, step 3, step 4, step 20, whatever that is. Building the company, how do I do that? Who do I do? What were some of the things that you did, and who were some of the people maybe that you kind of cultivated, if you will, to assist in that process?
The main thing I did was just go commit to falling on my face like 30 straight meetings with VCs. We had 51 people invest in our first round. No venture money at all. Very unusual way to raise money, right? So private, high net worth angel investors who each invested between $10,000 and $250,000. Most of them between 25 and 50. It's very unusual. It's like it's a lot easier to go get one person to write a check, and I tried. But every time I did that, I got the same thing. Well, you're still practicing law. You haven't built the product. All you have is this piece of paper. Where's the rest of your team? And ultimately, and little things, like I went to my first meeting with NEA, and this is one of the largest venture capital funds in the world. They manage $3 billion. And I call up the partner afterwards and said, felt like it went well. What hard-hitting, trenchant feedback do you have for me so I can improve? And the guy says, well, first of all, never wear a suit on Sand Hill Road. Shit, okay, I'm sorry. So stopped wearing a suit, showed up to the next VC meeting, and then it was, well, you don't have a slide on the competitive landscape, so, we've lost confidence in you. Oh, okay, so I show up to the next one. There's my slide on the competitive landscape. Well, where's the barriers to entry? I don't see your slide on the barriers. And so this happened so many times that I got reasonably good at raising money. You have 51 conversations. You get really good at refining the business, and you learn a lot through the process. So I went to my father and got a lot of good advice from him. I went to Larry and got a lot of good advice from him. But truthfully, there's many moments of complete despair. We stalled out at around $600,000 for about a month around Thanksgiving, and I remember saying, if we don't get to $1 million by Thanksgiving, I'm going to call it off. And we inched over that, and then just when you're at your absolute wit's end, a guy calls you and says, oh yeah, I heard my buddy and my private equity fund that I'm in the same fund with, heard he's putting in $25,000. I've never met you. Can we talk briefly? We talk for 15 minutes, and then I get an email from his assistant saying, so-and-so wants to put in $250,000 for his primary investment. What? Okay. So you have 15 moments of complete, I can't believe that fell out of bed. I can't believe that guy backed out. And then you have these incredible moments of catastrophe that you could never foresee. And so decided at that point, I had set 2 goals for myself. One was, I want to actually quit the law firm and not just be one of those guys that talks about starting something and never jumps off the diving board. If I just do it, then I'll always be proud of myself for doing it. Sorry if this is going in and out, but the other goal for myself was I want to do it for long enough that I never have to go back to being a lawyer again. So I don't want to just be flash in the pan one round and then we're done in 12 months. I want to build something lasting such that this if I love it, this can be what I get to do. And those are my 2 goals. And all the goals I've set since then, it's helpful to remind myself, no, those are not one of the original goals. Those are now new goals that you set because it's gone well. But those are the goals.
So in building that, you get to Ibotta, you start it.
Actually, no. I got to a company called Zing.
Oh, Zing.
That's what we used to be called.
Okay. All right.
Now
Let's
we're
go
called
back to
Ibotta.
that. Let's go back to that.
Sure. We used to be called Zing. It's not a particularly great story, except that a few of the investors said, well, that sounds too much like the other 87 companies like Zynga and Zing this and Zing that, and you're going to get sued. So unless you change the name, I'm not interested in investing. Okay. / I couldn't get the guy who owned Zing.com to sell it to me for less than $1 million. So I then went through a ridiculous series of company names that only my wife knows all of them. But, I mean, it's embarrassing how bad some of them are. Really, really bad. Like Lychee.com, for example, and CPGme.com was particularly bad.
CPG.
Oh, God. There were so many Zing rebates, Zing grocery. Oh my God, brand by brand. I mean, I have literally like 80 domain names to this day. They're all terrible. But the point is, I finally settled on Ibotta. It was a short, meaningless domain I could buy for $8 a year that I knew I could invest with whatever meaning I needed to as the business evolved. And it was a pun. It was basically the things I bought. And I knew the core idea was I was going to track advertising or offers all the way through to purchase, and so that at least wouldn't change. And it has its downsides, certainly. One every 10 times someone calls it Ibotta or Ibotta or some other variant. But bottom line is, if you look at all the silly names of companies out there, it doesn't really matter as long as it's a short URL. That's how we arrived at Ibotta. But it started out, Gregory joined a company called Zing. I don't know where you are, Gregory, out there somewhere, but there he is. Gregory joined a company called Zing. He was the first employee 2 years ago. We started out in my house, and unfortunately my dog had a crippling episode of diarrhea on day one. And I'm setting up the bank account or something, and I go out, and there's Gregory, who's just moved out from New York City, who I barely know, who I've met for like one day, who's just picked up and moved his entire, I mean, his story is, he should be up here, fascinating. He's moved all the way out here. I find him cleaning up after my dog, which was totally not in the job description. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to last about two
That's
two
not
hours.
part of that other duties as assigned.
So he and I then went and we looked at some office space up by the Purina factory right off I-70, if you've ever had the pleasure. It was very inexpensive. For some reason, I thought we had raised like $300,000, not $3 million. But we very narrowly went to this. It's I think it used to be a hospital. It feels a bit like The Shining, this building up there. And Gregory kind of tactfully said, "Well, I think there's a building in Lodo that we look at that building." So we ended up in Lodo, which was the only reason why we were then able to recruit any other employees. So
They didn't want to hang out by the old Purina factory.
No.
That's a pretty scary place over there.
It's terrifying.
I bet it was.
There was no food within a 2-mile radius. And
Well,
that was like a convenience store.
there had to be some of those carts along the road over there.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No.
Okay. So now you've come to the point where you have this idea. You got money. You trying to figure out where you're going to go first. You told me that, and again, you hired Gregory.
Yep.
So what was the next stage? What were the key components? Right. You said you went up and down. You had some things to overcome.
Oh yeah.
Right. Some obstacles. Be interested to know what were some of the big obstacles and what you did to kind of get over those. We know about the fundraise, but just kind of get to that next piece. How did you get Gregory, and what were the next things that you guys did to get the ball rolling?
Gregory is one of these guys who's thrives in conditions of complete uncertainty. So he had actually run a huge business for Mary Kay in Russia right after the fall of the Soviet Union, taught himself Russian, went over there, and then the ruble devaluation happened and his business collapsed overnight. And he was like, that sucks, but I'm going to move on. The guy is basically perfect for the complete chaos of starting a company. So that was not a big challenge working with him. It was helpful, actually, because it's terrifying when neither one of us have any engineering ability. And we have this vague idea of a product, and we get on the phone with somebody, and they're like, oh, that's just like that other product. No, it isn't. It's so different. So you start to realize, shoot, we got to really change what it is we're building here and change, the whole thing starts to kind of come into focus. I have $3 million, and my idea just got, destroyed by the first retailer I talked to. So we quickly realized that we needed to build something and start rapidly experimenting and iterating on a prototype. And the biggest mistake I almost made but didn't make was almost, like had the contract hovering over it, hiring a development shop to build our product. We would have spent $500,000 to $1 million on that. It would have been the end of our company. We didn't, thank goodness, because they were preying on my insecurity that I couldn't find a world-class engineer to build it in-house. And it's terrifying when you've got recruiters, just let me hire somebody for you. You've got the company saying, oh, just let me build it for you, and it's so easy to give them the check and just kind of, oh, it's going to be great. But nothing that's great has ever been built in that fashion ever in the history of mobile technology. So we sucked it up and spent basically 2 straight months doing nothing but recruiting efforts for a lead engineer. Sat there and played headhunter for 2 months. Went to stand-ups and meetups like this and looked for Luke. Luke Swanson, who had been the first employee at PhotoBucket and is one of the absolute best engineers in the United States, happens to live in Denver, had turned down offers to work at Gilt and Dropbox and Picasa and goodness knows where else. And this guy happened to be ready to transition out of PhotoBucket. I talked to his brother Connor about another candidate, and he said, my brother is maybe someone you should talk to. And yes, tonight. And so we went and we had a beer with Luke. He was going up to the PhotoBucket retreat in Steamboat, and we cornered him basically and said, we got all this money. We know this market exists. We've got to build this thing. Can you build this thing? And Luke took like 3 weeks to think it over. Somehow, we convinced this guy to say yes. And that was a huge turning point because he then brought on board 6 other outstanding engineers and designers. So seeing through that moment of self-doubt and saying no to those agencies and finding our own team and building our own product, and then dealing with the scariness of having to rapidly change the product, we would put a table out in front of Coors Field, and we actually would show passersby, we would give them one of these waters. This really pissed off the woman who sold the waters right outside because we were basically giving them away for free if people would give us feedback on our product. And we would hey, come on in, because we were right on 18th. They'd be like, come on in and check it out. And we would show them this prototype or a piece of paper and say, we just want to watch you use it. Is it clear? Can we ask you 3 questions? And it was utterly unclear, and it was back to the drawing board. And we did this like 15 times, to where we just continually evolved and iterated until we had something we thought was awesome. That was something it's not, lawyers don't get trained to think that way. Lawyers get trained to adhere to precedent. Staying in the safe harbor of what happened before and came before is what you do as a lawyer. In disruptive innovation, it's the exact opposite. So that was hard. And then there's been many, many, many other, this is one day at Ibotta. One day. Today, I had at least 3 calls that went like this in the middle of a 30-minute call. We think we're going to pass. Oh, okay, send us a proposal. Okay, great. And that's the vicissitudes of life are so much, the amplitude is so much greater in starting a business than anything else I've ever done. And so emotionally managing that and channeling that productively has required me to grow up quite a bit.
So how do you do that? You come from like you said, an environment that's very structured, and like you said, based on precedent and a bunch of other things. How do you go from that to managing yourself in a situation where it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily managed chaos, but to some extent there has to be some element about the ups and downs. How do you get through those?
People like Gregory and Luke, people who don't panic under pressure. So, we've had so many clenching moments where you go, oh my goodness, we need to figure out a solution to this. This client is upset, or this product isn't performing, or this person's trying to defraud us. And you look around, and Luke and Gregory are both extremely even keel. So that helps. And you just pick up, you absorb other people's good habits of how to build a product or whatever. And then I think you just realize that the sky doesn't actually fall. And you go through enough crises where you kind of wake up the next morning and you're still alive. It's a bit like the Princess Bride, the Dread Pirate Roberts. Good night, Wesley. I'll most likely kill you in the morning. It's a bit like that. You wake up and I'm still alive, and then one day you're the Dread Pirate Roberts. It just happens. It evolves. But there's I'm not going to pretend it's been easy. There's definitely, like every night when I come home and Jen says, "What'd you do today?" I'm like, it's like the Chevy commercial where the guy goes through his entire day. He just sits there and goes, and you have to learn how to kind of manage the number of different whizzing projects and balls in the air, delegate to people who are talented, accept that a good idea can come from anywhere in your organization, take heart in the fact that you're not the only one working on this project. It used to be that I was the only one carrying the load and working 2 jobs, and now I look out and there's 40 people. And they're all really, really talented, and they all have different skills and ideas, and that's extremely reassuring because you go, gosh, these people have always won and achieved at everything they've ever done in their lives. And the saying McKinsey has, winners win. That's absolutely right. You find a way to win if you're that kind of person, to that kind of dedication. And when you have 40 of those people, that's super fun feeling. You just feel strong. And then you look at all the other companies that you're competing with, and they have 200, 500, 1,000 employees, and you say, I'll take our 40. I'll take our 40, which is what makes it so much fun. The source of fun is the teamwork, the sense of joint purpose. That's why I like trying cases. It's me and these other 5 people, and we're in the trenches, and we're going to win. If you're competitive, like me, and you're team-oriented, that is so much fun. And if you told me I could fast forward to a pot of money right now, I would say no, because the whole point of it is the winning as a team and the contributing that verse that hasn't ever been contributed. So why would you fast forward through that? That's folly.
Okay, cool. That's good. Thanks. Okay, so in the competitive nature, and going back and looking at first to market, for example. So you guys are building product and everything, and you hear a lot. You gotta be first to market. You gotta be first to market. First to market. How do you, with the competition? You said before you went back and you said, "Hey, there's all these companies out there. They're just like me," or whatever. So how do you define yourself, your company, but how do you get to maybe a decision, if you will, to say we have to be this much better than the next guy, or is it more of a we're going to do what we're going to do because we do it best, or is it a combination of both? Right? Do you look at what the other competition is doing, or do you really not care about that, or how do you take that into consideration versus where you want to be? You said, I want to do this, I want to do this. I'm just going to stick to the path.
Good question. A lot of subparts. First thing I would say is you have to decide what it is you're trying to build, and why. I knew very early on I'm not trying to build something that is a slightly better executed version of something that's out there. I wanted to contribute something original that would last and outlast this venture and this app. It's a set of ideas that will change the way people think about advertising. And that was always clear to me. It's like the commercial that's running now with the quote from Dead Poets Society, in turn quoting Whitman. The powerful play goes on and you get to contribute a verse. So are you contributing a verse, or are you just warming over somebody else's ideas? Are you saying something original? Do you stand for a set of ideas that other people don't agree with, but that you're going to prove are right? Do you have a hypothesis? Do you have a paradigm shift? That's what interests me. So when I go to CES, for example, I find it depressing that 80% of the stuff that's at CES is not truly innovative or disruptive. It's just another mobile phone case. Okay. And so if it's worth doing, it's worth doing it in a way that will change the way people fundamentally think about something. And that for us was the way that brands and retailers communicate with consumers on mobile devices. Therefore, I didn't try to copy other existing products. On the other hand, there's a great book, Steal Like an Artist. Everybody steals and borrows and is inspired, whether you're Led Zeppelin, I don't care who you are, you stole something from somebody somewhere, even if you didn't know it. It happens subconsciously. It's just the fact of seeing what else is out there influences what you build, and so we absolutely look what our competitors do, and they're running free experiments. It's like watching somebody else play poker hands with an open hand on ESPN. That's how you learn. So you can only play a certain number of hands, but if you can watch other people play hands, you can learn faster. So you'd be an idiot, in my opinion, to be like, oh, we're building this thing, and in fact, if you're not looking at the signals that your users are giving you and your competitors are giving you, you're playing. Everybody else is getting to see all the cards, and you're playing with just one set of cards. So I think that it's fundamentally, though, about knowing what you're doing and why. We're building something here in Denver. We're building something that's never existed on mobile technology before, and we are expanding that set of ideas to the places where it makes sense, different parts of the economy, and that's, I think, why I don't view this as I want to make this amount of money or I want to exit in this amount of time. It's we'll build this thing however long that takes, and that's fun. I'm enjoying my job. I don't have any need to hit the ejector button on it. I've never felt that in one day of this job.
Okay, so we talked about the idea, right? We hear a lot of people talk about, and you go to these events or whatever, and people say you have to sell the idea, right? And you heard it, well, it's an idea. You don't have X, Y, Z. You don't have the product. You don't have this. You don't have all that kind of stuff. So when you're out there, when you were talking with those folks, and you're still talking with them, I'm assuming, and getting more capital, more, even customers. You've got something that's working. It's the next idea. How are you, what do you do to sell that idea in a way to where it may or may not be tangible. It's it's your idea. So how do you go about getting that to the point where a person says, I really think I want to do that. Like you said before, you went out and talked to these guys and you said, I have this idea. It's a one page, whatever. What was it about the idea, or maybe it's you? Maybe it's about how you presented it to them that gave them that vote of confidence, if you will, for themselves to say, yeah, I want to do that. I want to be part of that.
I'll briefly touch on the idea stage, but it might be more interesting to touch on post that stage. I think if you're an investor, you're looking at a person's ability to solve problems under conditions of uncertainty before the money runs out. It's almost certainly one thing we can agree on is that the thing they're talking about and the model and the numbers that they projected have absolutely zero probability of coming to pass. So the exercise is about demonstrating critical thinking ability, not about predicting some even remotely reasonable likely scenario. It's just a shell game. Honestly, it's a shell game. It's reasonable assumptions. It shows you're asking all the right questions, but what you're really betting on is, as soon as on day 3 that idea goes out the window, is this person going to freak out, or are they going to work the problem and come to some idea? We had no focus whatsoever on brand engagement, which is videos, recipes, polls. The thing that is now our central differentiator in the market did not exist when I raised the $3 million. You won't find a reference to it anywhere in my deck. We got, on day 3 of the job, started talking about this thing we were going to do, heard these objections that it's identical to this other company, and went, uh-oh. And then we came up with what is now almost synonymous with Ibotta, and that's what our investors were investing in, is that. To answer your question about why people sign up, there's always a chicken and egg. If you're not known, how do you get customers? How do you get brand partners? Who are you? I mean, Target famously told me on a call, let me give you some free advice, Bryan. The history of these things tends to be big companies like Target. We just crush little companies like Ibotta, and that's just sort of the way it goes. Now they're one of our clients a year later. So at the time, I was reasonably offended by that, but that just makes it more satisfying now, to be honest. But the key concept that I would say we've employed is what I call parent trap. How many of you guys have seen the movie The Parent Trap from the 80s? Okay, so you remember that Haley Mills, she had this strategy to get her parents back together. Okay, she was in the movie playing twins. She's not like 50. This is dating me. But anyway, the point is, her parents were splitting up. She went and told her father that her mother really was still secretly in love with her father, and she went and told her father the exact converse about her mother. And so that's what we do. We go to Target and we say all the brands and vendors that make products that are sold in Target, they are on board. They're funding this thing. The train is leaving the station. You're either in or you're out. Either this thing is going to, Walmart and Publix and Kroger are going to benefit, or you can get in on this game and you're going to get all these great trips and benefits. And then we go to the brands and go, working with Target, great relationship with them. App works there. You need to get in on this because they're hugely supportive. Until those statements are all true. Initially, you were just priming the pump on both sides of essentially this conversation, and it's sort of a bit like a kind of a fake it till you make it. You always have to know how far you can go before you've gone too far and you get called out and then you crash and burn. But there's got to be a kernel of truth, right? Haley Mills' parents actually were still in love with each other, or they just didn't know it yet. So, so Parent Trap is a very, very, very important idea. And it's actually really fun because it applies to investment too. Because investors don't, 1 out of every 1,000 investors actually wants to crack into the data, roll up their sleeves, and understand the assumptions you're making in your business and how big it could become. The other 999 of those investors just want to feel like they're not the first one to bet on this thing, and there's some other people who are really smart who have already validated this, and they want to rely on that heuristic and move on. And so what you do is you create the impression, which is probably helpful if it's grounded in truth, but sadly not required, that the train is leaving the station. This thing is hot. It's oversubscribed. You got to get in on this thing, and it's like, where do I sign? And then they do a truncated version of the diligence and sign. And so it is sometimes important what hand you hold in poker, but a lot of times it isn't as important as the hand you project. And so if you play poker, it's actually pretty good training ground for this. you want to project the hand, and when you understand how that dynamic works, at the margins, if you repeat the hand enough times, you're going to win. And I think that's sales, basically, is a combination of listening and addressing objections and becoming better, but also just being extremely high output, high energy, and describing the world you want to exist a half step before it exists.
Okay, does that go through with future product development that you guys are doing? I'm assuming that you came out with the 2.0, right, recently?
Yes.
And there's some things about it that you're expanding into different markets.
Yeah.
So I think it was in TechCrunch. I think there was a deal about that, and how you're moving into restaurants and these other things. So is that the same strategy you're using there as well?
I don't know. There's about 5 people in this room who you're going to ask that question of. I imagine they will use some of those techniques. I mean, look, once you're a known brand and you have 3 million users and you have 500 brand partners, it's a different challenge. Now it's about how can I enter into partnerships and be thoughtful about which ones I enter into, and how can I scale this thing aggressively to preclude competition. It's different than the first 18 months. There's way less parent trap when you're the 16th most frequently used mobile app in the U.S. and you have a study that says so. It's different. Nonetheless, if you're selling into the Gap or American Eagle or Macy's or JCPenney's, I mean, here's what happened with Macy's today, okay? Well, I mean, why don't you call us when you have 3 or 4 other apparel providers that are already in the app, i.e. we don't want to be the guinea pig. Okay, well, we definitely lined up some meetings and conversations with the Gap and with Coach and American Eagle Outfitters, by which I mean I handed someone a business card at a conference last week. And we are meeting with the Gap, to be fair. But then it was, well, okay, if you have a kind of a pilot thing you think we could do, yeah, why don't I put a proposal together? Then you can react to it. We can get some data and give you the story you need to really socialize this and sell this in internally. I'd be happy to do that. And all of a sudden, there you go. So you're not known in apparel. You signal that, oh, okay. Same thing with AMC Theaters earlier this week. It was, we're talking to Regal, we're talking to Fandango. We don't have a relationship with them. Wanted to give you the first look at this. Oh, okay, I'll get you in touch with my partner. You just have to understand how to create a sense of inevitability, that the world is bending in the direction of your thesis, and when people feel that, they flip out. Basically, the highest motivator that I've ever found in sales, sadly, is not hero potential, ROI. It's, oh my God, I'm going to miss out on this. It's the fear of being left behind, the fear of, oh my God, I missed the boat. And so I don't understand this thing. It's big. My competitor, I'm going to get called out. I missed this trend. Once you tap into that fear, it's much easier. If you start appealing to other human impulses, they're just less powerful. That's one of my insights. I'm sure there's many other salespeople in this room who have their own theories on these things. My theory is that the fear of missing out is one of the single most powerful motivators, and that if you can figure out how to position it as, this thing's happening, baby, and you're about to miss out, bam, all of a sudden, investors want in, partners want in, people want to join your team, whether you're recruiting, whatever it is. It's a very valuable skill to develop, I think.
Okay, that's really good. I like that. So the people you have, you went from you have 40 now, right?
Yeah, just bringing on 5
You just
highly
brought on
talented
5
people
that started
next
today.
week, which I'm very, very, very excited about. So yeah, we're getting closer to between 40 and 50.
Okay. So you read a lot about, and I want to get your opinion on this. What are the most important things about a startup? Getting it to a point, you said 18 months, whatever. What are the most important parts about that? Like the top 3 things that you think. And then you're going through this transition. Are those different? Have those changed the top 3 things that you think are the most important? If you were to prioritize, so what's that? Are they? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think in the first phases of a company, it's keeping the faith, being very iterative, listening, not presuming you know what the consumers want. If you go in thinking, I'm building this thing that everybody wants, every now and then you're Steve Jobs. Congratulations, you told the public what they wanted and you were just right and great. But the vast majority of the time, you better be listening because you're wrong. And they're going to tell you real loudly and real clearly by stopping using your product or never starting using it or whatever it might be. Later, and then you're doing everything. I mean, for the first 6 months, I was basically doing everything with Gregory. Now it becomes much more specialized, and you can't do everything. It's actually harmful to try to do everything. You need to stand other people up, empower them, talk them up, give them confidence, give them skills, and let them go. And it's setting a tone and creating a culture that's constructive. I've worked in a workplace where people tore me down and belittled me and were threatened by me and undermined me with my partners. And I remember that. That lesson affects how I run this company every single day. I try anyway to run it. And so it's about setting a culture. It's about setting expectations and empowering people, giving them tools and the oxygen that the venture needs, which is more capital, which is more resources and best practices and so forth. And so you have to kind of leave the founder role behind and really become a true CEO. And all the things that come after that, I'm going to have to tell you in 2 years, because this is still my first rodeo. So I can't really tell you what it takes to IPO or whatever the other exciting things that may lie down the path may be, because I'm still learning them.
Okay, so in that,
Sorry.
when you look, no, it's great. When you look down that path, you had mentioned earlier that you want this to be something that you're going to be here, and this is something that you're going to take, and you're going to keep moving. And I think you mentioned if there was $1 zillion down the road, you wouldn't take it because of X, because you love what you're doing.
Well, I'll still take the $1 zillion. I'm just saying it's
you wouldn't pass it up.
It's about
okay.
If I had to give up the journey, it wouldn't be worth it.
Okay. I like it. So if you were in that.
But if I had the journey anyway, I'm sure as hell taking that money.
So when you look at people, you come into Ibotta, it's a day in life of Bryan. You come in.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of what that's like. You walk in. How's that? I know days are up and down and they're crazy and whatever, but not that there's a typical day, but
it is such a fun thing to get to do. Come in. We have what's called a stand-up every morning at 9. Everyone gathers in one room, and we talk about, not every single person talks, but by group we talk about what we did yesterday, what we're focusing on today, and if there's anyone who's blocking us or who we need them to do something. And so everyone gets a sense of what's going on in the company. And then as me, I get to go into all of those buckets in different capacities. So I have certain tasks that I have to do that are just sort of blocking and tackling. Like I'm effectively the general counsel of the company still, unfortunately, for my sins. But I also get to work closely with the product team. So I get to look at new features and screenshots and make decisions about the user experience, which is the creative side of my brain, which I really love. And that's my first love. I want to be part of that until the company doesn't want me anymore. But then I also get to be on the sales calls and the business partnerships, really scouting in advance, scouting new areas, potential interests, and then handing those off to the people who I can trust to run with them. And then I get to do the outward-facing stuff, so the investor relations and board relations. And then there's a whole host of other things having to do with management of people, personnel, growing the company, making decisions about the physical space of the company, the culture, which the variety is just very stimulating. And I think that it's a young feeling place to work. The law, it penalizes youth. Being in a technology startup, it rewards it. It keeps you young. And I love that. And I love being around such a variety of talented people. I mean, we have a designer who's covered in tattoos, and you might see him and go, God, this guy's some sort of, tattoo freak show, if you were inclined to think that. And then you realize, oh my God, this guy's one of the most creative, talented people I've ever met. And, to motivate him requires a completely different set of buttons and skills, than, say, our sales guys and gals. But it's fun to get to see kind of different kinds of virtuoso talent. In the law, everyone's really good at making arguments. Everyone's really analytical. And, you're all around a bunch of people who've overdeveloped one side of their brain and the atrophy of the other side, and they never learned how to manage or interact and play well with others. They always got straight A's. Their mother always loved them. It just gets old. The variety of interactions that you have with a developer, a salesperson, a marketing team member, a creative, customer service is way, way, way more fun and interesting. And I say to Jen all the time, it is so much fun just to be on this ride that I just hope it never ends. I wouldn't trade this last 2 years for anything.
So when you look for talent, people are important. What are some of the key things that you look at from people that kind of work at Ibotta? What are some of the characteristics outside of skills and experience? Like, what are some of the other the attributes about a person that you look at?
Yeah, fit with the culture is such a generic phrase, but that's what it is. It's basically there's a team environment that we have that I think is really important. And I in my marriage for 17 years, in my relationship with Jen, we've had a zero sarcasm policy. We don't interact with each other that way. It tears people down. Teasing is only okay up to a certain point. You know, I want it to be a constructive environment where people are rooting for each other. So, for example, when we get a big win on a sales project, we put up a picture of Leighton Hewitt. And Leighton Hewitt was famous because after he would win a big point, he would go, "Come on!" And he would have these crazy gestures, and he would be exhorting himself. And so after I would land a huge deal, Kane would hear me screaming in my office, you know, "Come on!" right after I would hang up, like, "Let's do this. We're going to storm this thing. Let's go," you know? And so he kind of took that and said, all right, let's make that a fun thing. So when we get a $50,000 deal or higher, we put Leighton on the wall, we write it up on the board, and we celebrate it. And it's fun, you know, and that's what's the price you put on that? And so people that fit with the culture of celebrating everybody else's wins, you know, not being too focused on their own individual side of it, but really just the enterprise and wanting to be part of building something, wanting to be, you know, it's not good enough to be just good. We're trying to build something that is by far the best known brand ever to come out of Colorado. That's what we're doing. No one's ever really built a household name consumer mobile product in Colorado. We want to do that. And I want people to get out of bed and think about how can we do that. And it's just very clear the kinds of people that we've had. We've been lucky. People have come to us who are superstars, who are highly coveted. They're usually, many of them, not looking for a job, and we persuade them, or they see something that gets exciting to them. And you know, I'm fortunate enough to say that I believe it's the case, and nobody's ever voluntarily left our company, which says something about, I think, about the level of excitement. But it is largely a high energy, high expectations, but supportive environment where I try to model the things that, at least I do anyway, try to model the good trial teams I was on and stay away from the destructive belittling people in public and in front of their peers and those sorts of things, which I found very traumatic when they happened to me as a young partner.
Okay. Because we cared a lot about, we were in a discussion a while back about the culture, right? Culture of a company. And you know, I think at Startup Week, I think we talked a little bit about that too, about your place, you know, where you work, where the people go. And, you know, there was this big thing at that point in time about, you know, all the nuances around, you know, enticing people to come and work for you with, you know, foosball, ping pong, whatever. And so
I'm disappointed there's no foosball.
I'm sorry. So, I mean, do you think, you know, I think you mentioned before that those are not the most important things. If I were to come work for Ibotta, what would you say are the three most important things about Ibotta and why I would work there?
Well, I'm going to dodge that for 1 second while I think of a better answer. But I will say that generally speaking, we're not 20 years old and just looking to play foosball and, you know, mess around like college kids. I mean, we're in there's an interesting thing I've been thinking about recently, which is we're in that zone between old enough to have some judgment and young enough to have a lot of energy. And I think that therefore a lot of us are in our late 20s, early 30s, early 40s, and that spills over into the culture. So we don't go in for kind of the, not to name names, but, you know, the Pivotal Labs type deal where you know, we're all going to kind of do the Facebook Silicon Valley thing in the office. I mean, we're trying to build a multi-billion-dollar business, and so we take it a little bit more seriously than that. So we participate in Startup Week and have fun and have happy hour and board game night and things like that are important to the culture. But, you know, we're trying to build something huge, and so there's a sense of urgency. There's a high standard. I try to model that. I think everybody gets that. We don't go mess around for 4 days at South by just to hang out at other Colorado companies. That's not who we are. So, we don't give out a ton of swag just because it makes us feel like we work at a tech company, even though it's deeply ROI negative. There's just, people would rather have that money in their salary, so we give it to them in their salary, and we give them a reason to make a ton of money. And we're proud of our brand because it's a successful business that is going to employ a large number of people and spin off a lot of millionaires and a lot of other companies, in my heart of hearts. So I just think we have a different mentality than, say, the Techstars culture. We're a Denver company as well, which I think is important to our identity. I've been told, well, why don't you move to California? Well, I like Denver. I like the culture. I like the balance. I like the work-life balance, and I like the entrepreneurial spirit of the place, and it's fun to be entrepreneurial about creating an entrepreneurial community. If I go be the 40th entrepreneur doing shopping applications in Mountain View, or we can be building something here that's going to change the way people think about this city. Don't get me started. It drives me insane that I'm still hearing about Missy Franklin's gold medal on the DIA air train instead of the mayor saying, did you know there's all these tech companies in Denver and you should think of Denver in that light? That'd be helpful. Anyway.
So that's the king for a day question.
That's a king for a day question. There's a lot of king for a day. But anyway, the three things that distinguish Ibotta are, I think, the level of ambition. What we aspire to create is truly something that will change the way people think about an entire method of communication. We're not a feature functionality company. We're trying to change from a thesis statement about pop-up interruptive advertising on mobile to an organic, captive, engaging, voluntary, incentivized interaction, which has never existed before. So our level of ambition. Number two, I think our values in terms of valuing our team environment, each other, treating each other with respect, building something that we all feel we had a hand in. A good idea can be accepted no matter who raises it. A sense of we have a structure, but there's also room for everyone to add to that verse. That play is everyone's part. They all view it as their opus, not just Bryan's opus. So the ethos of the team, I think, is very, very important. And then I would say the last thing is that if there have to be three, I suppose there's arbitrarily could be 4 or 5. Yeah, there's always 3. I was a lawyer; everything's in threes. The last thing is that I would say we are committed to open to revision. I guess the way we think about the way to be a good lawyer is to be willing to tear apart your brief and start over. And it's really hard, but in 18 months we've launched and relaunched and relaunched and relaunched version 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 18, 24. I think that level of willingness to go, God, it's still not right. Let's go back to the drawing board. That's a big part of Luke's, and everyone else's philosophy about and why our product is so much better than our competitors. So it's not just enough to be ambitious. It's how are we going to have enough humility to realize that this still isn't good enough, and we just keep after it. So there's a level of cycles on that I think has differentiated our company. Yeah, I think that was the answer to your question. No. Sorry, I was just going to keep rambling. You go ahead.
No, that's good.
I should apply my respond to the judge's question and shut up the theory. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say you mentioned Denver a couple of times, and I'm a native from Colorado, and I appreciate you doing it here in Colorado and Denver. I think it's awesome. I think there needs to be a little bit more of the what you had mentioned, a focus on companies doing something here as opposed to something that may or may not be important anymore. I mean, these things are important, right? So, thank you for that.
Well, sure.
Denver's
an awesome place to live.
I'm glad you're here.
There's amazing talent, and we get to get all of it because there's no other really at-scale consumer-facing technologies in Colorado. I mean, MapQuest was acquired a long time ago. Therefore, people that want to do that, they're amazing people. Everyone wants to live in Denver. There just aren't enough opportunities to work in really exciting environments in Denver. But as soon as that starts to change, boy, watch out, because everyone wants to live here. So the people who live right now coastally and enjoy paying 2x and all that good stuff, they go, wow, I can come work for a company like Ibotta and the 5 companies that spin off of Ibotta. This is great. Come on over. And so we want to be part of that tipping point. I know when I came out here with Jen, I couldn't find a place to work that was compelling, coming out of the Supreme Court, it was lucky that Bartlett Beck had an office here, which is just random. They did no work here at all, but they had this outpost. But for that, I never would have moved here. So I want to be part of bringing the next 100, 200, 500 people out here, and then that begets other great decisions, because until there's a critical mass of companies here, it's not safe to move here, because you get fired or it doesn't work out, and then what? Or my wife needs to come out here and there's nowhere for her to work. So we all have to build ventures in Colorado that create a critical mass, and I think it's starting to happen, and Denver in particular. I think it's fun to be part of an underappreciated place. Like Datalogix is one of the most exciting companies in the United States. I just talked to a guy from Tiger Global, purportedly the best private equity fund in the United States. Never heard of the company at all. Wow, really? Never heard of them. Amazing, right? So there's so much exciting stuff here. We just think the city could do a exponentially better job of branding and marketing itself. Gets me back to my DIA rant, which I'm not going to go on. Instead, we have a bunch of pictures of guardian angels of death on the mural of our airport instead of something that actually suggests progressive city. But anyway, we're getting there, baby steps. You've all seen the one I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm. It's like really. Well,
I think we should just go out there and put our signs up on there. Do our own advertising.
Don't get me started. I got a lot of thoughts on what the city
sign up
could
for
do. The bottom line is another lesson. If you think the city's going to make your business into a world-class business, you're waiting for a harsh realization. Only you are going to do that. Partnerships aren't going to do it. Some acquisition isn't going to. There's no Deus ex machina. You are going to build it, or it ain't going to happen. So that's nice that the city wants to help you, but that's not what they're set up to do. They're set up to run the snowplow. So get out there, build your company, and don't rely on this or that business plan competition to put you over the edge. Learned that when we didn't make the finals of the business plan competition last year. Thing was rigged, but anyway, it's all good. It's all good. No, congratulate the winner.
No, I love this.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
So I forgot what the question I was going to ask you. So
right.
if you were,
I'll take this thing over now. It's
no,
all good.
exactly. No, which is great. So if you said your dad had I'm kind of going back now a little bit. Some of the key things when you were growing up.
We're going Days of Thunder, daddy issues now.
Daddy,
right?
No, we're not going down that road.
Okay.
Let's say
I thought it might be like Top Gun, Days of Thunder.
Okay.
Keep going.
Well, you've mentioned Tom Cruise a couple times here, so he must be
inspiring to me.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I didn't go become a fighter pilot. I went to law school.
Okay. Well, that's kind of like a fighter pilot, somewhat.
No.
You're just not flying around anywhere. Now you're flying around. Now you're the fighter pilot.
That's right.
Well, it's that competition thing, It's that get the competition. So
watching my father was important. My father's company was on the verge of bankruptcy. They raised money 20 times. On one occasion, they talked about bankruptcy. They drove to the bank to get them to do one last-ditch loan. They got one last-ditch loan. He went and had one sale, which was 400,000 discs, and the guy says, I only had ordered 100,000, and my dad says, oh, we already cut all the discs. Can you please take this shipment? And that kept the company alive. They then turned it around and turned it into a $2.2 billion company. That was an amazing story and unfortunately my parents' marriage disintegrated in the middle of that. So I've always been very worried about, maintaining focus on what really matters during this whole adventure. But I definitely watched the roller coaster and the downs of that too. After my father got out of that company, it was acquired by another company which had a huge accounting scandal, and it went to a penny stock. So all that my father's company had built up to $2 billion was basically destroyed almost overnight. So I've seen a lot, almost a lifetime's worth of other people's learnings, and I think you stand on the shoulders of people who've had those experiences, and it helps with a little bit of just putting things in perspective. And I call him when I'm feeling distraught. The team will let you know that I actually played a recording of a Coxon, one of my favorite motivational tapes, and I made the entire team listen to this thing because it's just one of those resources I turn to when things are tough. Just a few motivational mantras that I think are helpful for any entrepreneur.
Okay, just led me right into my next thing there.
All right, what's that?
So when you look at, you mentioned a couple mentors, couple idols, kind of people that you look up to. Is there anybody today that you're seeing in the tech world today, right? Maybe not even in your industry, but just in the tech world today that you would highlight as saying, that person's doing a really good job, that you may or may not emulate, but you say, they're doing some things that I want to do that I'm not doing today, let's say.
Well, I think like a guy like Elon Musk is a pretty remarkable fellow. I mean, really thinking outside the box, really disruptive innovation. I'm going to propose a tube that takes human beings from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and you tell me what's wrong with it. I want to go to space like Burt Rutan or like Dean Kamen, who started Segway, and now is doing an incredible amount of innovation that's helping bring water to African villages. These guys, they're not tinkering around incremental change. They're, you only pass this way once, and they're transforming the auto industry. That's amazing. I find that very inspiring. That level of setting your sights at that level. So I would one day love to be like them, but baby steps. First venture. Yeah, but I mean, a guy like Reid Hoffman, having been involved with LinkedIn and PayPal and Zing, it's like, come on. There's obviously a lot of talent there. The fact that the guys at I think what some of these other companies are doing, Square is doing some really interesting things. There are a lot of companies that I admire. I think Google is an amazing company. I've been just dazzled when I go to their campus and I look at how intentional they've been about their culture and how many unique things they do on their campus in Mountain View. How neat would it be if we built something like that here in Colorado one day? Almost impossible to fathom, but it's so inspiring to go to that part of the world. Even though I don't want to build our company there, I have to say that's a pretty special place. I mean, my story, the story of being a lawyer with no prior experience, no prototype, absolutely nothing but the ability to go, razzle dazzle on Sand Hill Road is not possible in any other country in the world. Period. It is not possible. It's not possible in England. It's not possible in Australia. It's not possible in Europe. It is not possible in Asia. It is only possible in this country. It is incredible that we have a regime that respects intellectual property and capitalism and the ability to have all the supporting structures such that somebody with no prior experience can transition in the way that I did in my career. It's the best part about America, and I think it's special. So those guys are my new heroes. I used to be interested in things like politics. I'm much more interested in what they're doing at this point in my life.
So how do you balance what's going on in Ibotta in the Bryan Ibotta world versus outside of there? What are some of the things that you do?
My wife's not here. Good. Okay.
Balance that. I mean, everybody talks about that whole balance thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
What's important? How do I, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know if I'm doing a good job of that or not. I think I am, but I'm living inside my head. I think that I have the experience of my father and my mother getting divorced when I was 11 in the middle of my father's venture. That's a cautionary tale that is never very far from my head. I have two daughters who, are very, very important to me, who I spend time with. I think being married to someone for as long as we've been together affects keeping your balance and perspective. But honestly, I wouldn't describe this as a hugely balanced phase of my life. It's not like I'm routinely exercising and eating well. I'm definitely in a. I think this is my. I feel acutely this is my chance to make the mark that I really want to make on the world, and I know what a tiny sliver of my life that'll be true, and I'll look back on it. And I have this whole personal philosophy that experiences only matter if they stick, if you remember them intensely, and to have them be memorable, that you have to go through something that's vivid enough and intense enough for it to kind of stick. So the experience of starting a company is about creating a large soup of those memories that will nourish you for the rest of your life. And so that's why teamwork's important. That's why camaraderie and joint purpose is so important, because it sears it into your mind to where no one can ever take that away from you. You cross the safety with that experience. And so for me, that's why I was an actor. I like the ensemble feeling. I like the feeling, the rush, the adrenaline, and that's such a vivid and powerful feeling that it stuck with you. In all your classes and everything else you learned, you just forget all that stuff because it wasn't intense enough to stick. That's what being an entrepreneur is. And so I try to appreciate that journey, I guess, while at the same time signaling to my children and my wife that I value them. My wife's a full-time doctor. She requires support and encouragement as well. So we've been together long enough that I've been intense for long enough that we've kind of figured out how to make that balance work to some extent. I don't know if you have to ask other people for an honest answer to that question. Sorry.
Okay. So when your children come to you and they say, "Daddy, what do you do?" What do you tell them?
I pull out my phone and I show them the app. That's what's so great. When I was a lawyer, it was like, this is deposition. He's an expert. I just type on the keyboard, you know. So when my child's kindergarten teacher finds out that her student's dad runs this app that she uses in the grocery store, that's an awesome feeling. I used to go to parties and people would say, "What do you do?" And I would say, "Well, I'm a trial lawyer, but it's kind of different, you see, because it's this boutique and it does this special kind of work, and it's not like, you know, lawyers, it's such a bad habit because you're already apologizing for yourself." When you go and say, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, we build and market our own branded mobile app. It's one of the most widely used mobile apps in the country. It's so much of a better feeling. And so it's just clear what you're building. When I was a lawyer, it always bothered me that I was probably worse at my job than Abraham Lincoln 200 years ago. So the practice of law just hasn't changed all that much. Doing something that you can only do in this generation, in this part of human history, is really cool. Nobody could have done it 5 years ago, and you wouldn't be interested in doing it 25 years from now. It's of the moment, and that's special and cool. There's nothing wrong with noble professions like law and medicine, but to me it's particularly interesting to kind of write a verse at a time when it's highly topical. And so I don't say that, I guess, to my daughters. I just say, you know, here's the app. And my kid already knows how to navigate apps at age 5 better than my dad. So they get it, which is cool.
So where do you look for inspiration? I mean, I've read a lot of stuff about, you know, founders and CEOs and this, that, and the other, and they say, well, I read this, or I look at this, or I follow so-and-so, or whatever. Is there any particular thing that you look at every day or weekly or whatever? What do you look for to help you?
I look to other people who I think have a quality that I could learn from, and how they respond to situations, and that's a pick-me-up. That's inspiration. Gregory, Luke, these kinds of guys, Kane, they've taught me a ton. That's inspiring. On a more hokey note, I carry with me, this is a true statement, I travel with, in my work backpack or my work satchel when I travel with a book called I Had Trouble in Getting to Salisalu by Dr. Seuss. And the reason I travel with that book is that it is a source of a reminder that there is no such thing as a trouble-free journey through being an entrepreneur. That the myth that there's this wonderful land of Salisalu on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where we never have any problems except very few, is a myth. And that you will go through that entire journey and you will come back to the Valley of Vung and you will conclude that you have problems, but I'm going to get out a club and I'm going to attack my problems rather than running away from them or fantasizing about some laureate moment in which we all ride off in the sunset. So that silly book is actually pretty meaningful to me and really reminds me that your daydreaming and wishing away problems is actually, the accomplishments don't have any meaning if they don't involve surmounting those hurdles. So you can't wish those away, or else the accomplishment lacks meaning. So stop trying to do that and just get after accomplishing and defeating and convincing the skeptics and flipping the targets. And that's what makes it have value and meaning to me is, wow, that little Denver company that we chose not to invest in NEA because that guy wore a suit to the meeting, that just sold for $3 billion. Boy, I could have gotten in on an $8 million post-money valuation. Whoops. Like, that's motivating. So anyway, there's the competitive side of me as well, which I look to other people who've continued to build things even when they don't need to, just because that's what they like to do. People like Reid Hoffman who, could have stopped people like Fred Bartlett. He was 63 years old. They say, you want to take a $2 million a year pension and ride off into the sunset? He said, no, I want to waive that and start my own law firm at age 63 and build it into a juggernaut that is the most respected law firm in the United States. That's amazing. That's inspiring. So I hope that I always have that same level of energy and I don't start to confuse the ends with the journey.
Cool. So at the end of the day, it's been 20 plus years, 30 plus years. You're sitting around and you're going, what? What do you think? Do you think that far out? Do you think about, well, I know you have children, what they're going to do, what they're going to, that kind of silhouette. How do you paint that picture for yourself and for your family, for the company, or just you personally?
I don't really think about it. If you had asked me 7 years ago during Rocktober, whether I would have been here, it would have been laughable. I would have assumed I would have been practicing law. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I would have assumed I was practicing law. So I don't think that far in the future, and I enjoy what I'm doing today, and I know that it could all be gone. I mean, companies come and go, people's health changes. My parents are still alive. My children are healthy. I just try and appreciate that. Honestly, I really don't have some next step planned out in my head. This is kind of the community I like living in, and I'm doing what I always had a suspicion I'd be good at and enjoy, and I found out that I was right, and that's enough for me.
So here's the question.
Oh boy, here we go.
Here comes the king for a day question.
The king for a day.
So if you're a king for a day, and you could change anything, doesn't matter what it is.
Doesn't matter what it is.
What would you do?
First of all, the Broncos definitely win the Super Bowl.
Yay.
I have a bet with my college roommate. If I win, I get greens fees at the site of the U.S. Open in Seattle. And if he wins, he gets a Vail lift pass, which he doesn't realize is going to be a buddy pass, which is heavily discounted. But, anyway. But it's legit. So I'm going to go with the Super Bowl. Then I'm going to go with, in the realm of technology and business, I'm going to go with complete overhaul of the patent system to stop inhibiting innovation and harming small companies. That's a major pet peeve. I'm going to go with Apple deciding to stop getting to decide on every feature of your app what goes in and isn't, so that they follow a Google model so that the market can decide whether an app is good or not. That would be nice. I'm going to go with venture capitalists actually making decisions about what might happen in the future instead of waiting for a company to not need capital and then suggesting that they'd be more than happy to invest. On the political side of things, I would go with, probably some controversial subjects, which it should be legal for people to get married regardless of their sexual orientation in the state. That would be nice. If I were king for a day, that wouldn't be unconstitutional here in Colorado. There are a few things along those lines. Campaign finance reform. I wrote a dissent for Justice Souter on campaign finance, and I'm still pissed that we couldn't get Justice Kennedy's vote, so I'd flip that case back the other way if I was king for a day. That was a really good dissent. He read it from the bench. Just needed one more vote. And then, if I was king for a day, I would, as I said, I would have the city stop focusing entirely on large companies like DaVita and actually take the time to understand that the future of the economy depends on high growth companies and figuring out how to create an environment that's more conducive to those companies growing quickly and putting the resources of the city behind that a little bit more. Those are some, not an exhaustive list, but some of the things. But I'll start with the Broncos. That I really want to go to that golf course and not to that ski resort. So.
Excellent. Okay, if there's something that the startup community could do as a whole here in Colorado, I mean, there's lots of stuff going on, as you know. I mean, we participate in those things, and you participate in. What are some of the things that you think the startup community could do here in Denver to help propel itself to where it needs to be or should be compared to maybe the East and West Coast?
Focus on consumer-facing technologies. The reason why we all know Silicon Valley is because of Facebook, Yahoo, Google, Foursquare, you name it, Square, Tesla. I mean, just keep going forever and ever and ever and ever. And there's New York has got tons of them, and Colorado has a bunch of great B2B companies that aren't household name consumer companies. Now, there's exceptions to that, restaurants, other, but I'm talking about tech. I mean, it's great that Smashburger's here and Red Robin's here, and that actually helps a lot. Miller, Coors, certainly, you could have great companies here, but I'm talking about a household name. The test is if I live in Beijing, I've heard of this company, that came from Colorado. MapQuest, I guess, is one of the big ones that broke through, but has sort of faded a little bit. I would like to see there be more people tackle that space and win big. I'd also like to see people hold out and build a bigger company. So Techstars has been great for the region, but with the exception of SendGrid and a couple other, most of those companies have been small. They've been acquired small. They flipped for small amounts of money, or it just isn't an anchor tenant. And we've been as Andre Duran at Ping has said, and this is not my phrase, but it's a great phrase, we've been a bait ball city, a place where people come and buy other companies and then take them elsewhere. Or they set up a little outpost like the Bing outpost, that's not good enough. I think the city and the entrepreneurial community needs to aim higher, and they need to do something that they're going to, and then they need to announce the fact that they're from Denver. They need to shy away from that and get talked out of being in Denver. They need to go be part of a campus, part of a community. They need to recruit other companies out here, and they need to support each other. So we try and work with Datalogics if we can. They try and work with us. That's helpful. And companies like Roximity, other companies, we try and work with them because they're based out here. So I think that changing the perception of Denver as not just being, I always bitch that when you watch Coors commercial, it reinforces the impression of Denver as an ice bowl tundra where someone's going to get a beer on the side of with an ice pick on the side of a mountain, or they show a picture of people skiing at Vail when it's like a cutaway from the Broncos game. Listen, people, that's 2 hours from here. That's not what the city of Denver is about. We're a dynamic, vibrant, high-growth companies. Let's market and tell that story. And Denver's changed the way it's marketed itself greatly, obviously, in the last 25 years. But I think we could go much further, and the city could brand itself and it could get out there and tell the success stories. Photobucket is a company that sold for $350 million. I'm going to guess most of you never heard of Photobucket. And I mean, all of you probably do, but most people in Denver, I had never heard of Photobucket. I lived here for 5 or 6 years, never knew they were based in Denver. One of the 50 most trafficked web properties in the world. No idea they're from Denver. So that's terrible. That's terrible, terrible, terrible. That has to change. And it's not just good enough that it's organic food companies and restaurants. It has to be really, really high growth, 1,000 employees. That's not here right now. So I'd like to see that change.
Actually, I think we'd all like to see that change, definitely. Being from here, growing up here, there was some of that a little bit. Like when MapQuest started, it was kind of felt like it was going to happen back in the.
Oh, and telecom and energy. Don't get me wrong. Like the tech center is all very valuable. I'm talking about this consumer-facing tech. When I came to move to Denver, I got a lot of sympathetic looks from my colleagues at the Supreme Court. Like, oh well, we'll never see him again. He's going to go be in horse and environmental law and oil and gas law, and he could have had a future. He could have been a contender. That is infuriating.
Poor Bryan.
Right. Never mind the fact that it's like, actually, my house is pretty awesome compared to your house because it costs half your house cost, and I get to work at this law firm, and, it's a well-kept secret. But the fact is, we need to continue to make it a place that really does have first-rate work opportunities. It's still, I have so many friends from Harvard, Oxford, or Yale who've thought about moving in here who have not because they just can't find a similarly compelling job as the one they have or the one their spouse has. And it's just a major problem, and I would like nothing more than to be a small part of addressing that problem. That would be very satisfying. I mean, we probably won't achieve it just as one company, but it would be great if that really changed because I think it really is overdue. It's such a great community. Minneapolis has 5 to 10 world-class places that you can work, and it's not that much of a bigger city. It just hasn't evolved that way. So I think it could, and perhaps it will.
Okay. Well, there was a question here, which you already asked. Is your favorite Dr. Seuss book?
Oh, no, you didn't. You had that question?
Yeah. And
I've answered that one already.
You've answered that one.
That question.
You don't like the all the places I'll go as well?
No. That's
no
good. Sorry.
Okay. It's one of my favorites, but that's okay.
No, I like On Beyond Z as well, though. If you want a second one, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's good, solid.
enough.
Yeah.
Something about Dr. Seuss that's pretty good there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
At this point, what I'd like to try to do is just if someone has a question related to whatever, I would just, if you wouldn't mind just standing up. I don't know if I could reach this far, but if you just would just really, there we go. I don't have the cordless one there.
It's not so much of a question, more of something that wasn't really addressed. The first hour when we were kind of mingling and talking to people, I interacted with about 4 or 5 people, and they're all entrepreneurs. I'm here as a consumer. They didn't know what Ibotta was. I explained it to them.
Oh,
This
yeah.
gentleman in front of me and a couple other people. Yes.
There you go. You won.
So, I mean, as much as you've been talking about how you started your company, and for most of these people that are entrepreneurs, all of that information is great, but some of them might want to know what your product is. You kind of touched on it here and there, saying it was a shopping app and things like that. People use it at the grocery store, whatnot, but they don't know what your final product is, I think.
Sure. Thank you. It's a free app that pays you cash. You can download it on your phone, on your smartphone or tablet. It delivers content, media about the world's leading brands. So it gives you a chance to learn more about different brands, products you might buy in the grocery store or elsewhere. You learn about them by watching videos, reading facts, recipes, taking a poll. You might endorse your favorite ones to your friends on social media, read what they have to say about them. And by interacting with and learning about these brands, what you're doing is unlocking rebates, essentially such that if you then go buy that product, either in a store or online, you get sent cash. So instead of the old rebate method of cutting out the UPC and mailing it in, which is something we all associate with pain and frustration and electronics, it's essentially instant cash rewards sent to your PayPal account as soon as you buy a product in the grocery store or another store, a movie theater, or a restaurant. What makes it unique is that it's a different quid pro quo. You're learning and interacting, going deeper, developing a sense of loyalty to a brand, and in exchange you're getting something of value. So instead of a pop-up ad hitting you saying, Audi. Oh, geez, I was reading this article about ESPN, and I don't want to see this thing about Audi that's interrupting my life, that's annoying. It's a voluntary zone where you can discover content on your time. It respects your intelligence. It's a captive place that you go to explore and discover. And then what you get of value is contingent on your trying that product, whether it's something you buy online or offline. So what we're doing is we're changing the way people think about buying media. From a consumer perspective, what we're doing is creating an app that pays you cash for buying your favorite products. We paid people almost $6 million last year. From a brand perspective, what we're doing is for the first time ever, making it possible to buy media at a $0 per click, $0 per impression model. What we're saying is unless you can track what media results in terms of an actual purchase, you should never pay for it. That's a revolutionary idea about how media is delivered. Today it's CPM, CPC. We reject the idea that that is a viable form of advertising. It's a necessary evil that we advertise in places that we can't measure, like television. What we believe is that future will move toward a place where you can actually be much more accountable with the way you market and advertise. So what we've built is a pay per sale advertising platform that is appealing to about 500 of the world's leading brands today, which I hope will expand to a bunch of other areas of life. So that's a great question. I don't need much invitation to just start rambling about the product. I'll try and get a download in the Avis parking lot, believe me. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Exit meaning selling the end game. Right. I deliberately try to dodge this question because I think it's unhealthy for me to imagine these laureate moments, I call them, the riding off into the sunset, and maybe it's just that I like thinking in this moment. But I think that my baseline thought is that we should not be a company that's dependent on getting acquired in order to have a liquidity event that's a return on investment for our investors. So what that means is we should build a business that is a business. It's not a utility with a billion users that will eventually figure out a business model, e.g., Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. It starts with a business model, and it wraps a product around a business pain point that someone will pay you to resolve. And therefore, you're going to have Ibotta, and therefore, you're going to have a real business that you can IPO and go to public markets and grow. That creates liquidity without being dependent on some deus ex machina like an acquisition from a Groupon or an eBay or a PayPal or whoever. If that happens along the way, then great. You got picked off and it was an offer so good you couldn't refuse. You have an obligation to your shareholders to entertain those conversations, and we've had lots of them. But we're having fun. Our best days are ahead of us. We've done all the hard work to get to this point. Low ball offers to come buy the company, which probably wouldn't be considered low ball by most entrepreneurs, but which I view as not even close to honoring the full potential of our business. I don't spend any time thinking about them. I will also say that our investors are patient. I mean, I think it's one of the good things about our particular strategy for capitalizing our company is that no one owns more than 2 or 3% of the company, anyone, any of the investors. And so that means that they sort of all along for the ride at some level. They're providing strategic guidance and advice, but there's no one person that controls the board. We control the board. So we decide whether we relocate from Denver or whether we get acquired or do the acquiring. And so the scary thing, I think, is always that you miscalculate and some exogenous factor happens and you turn down some incredible opportunity than you later wish you had. But I don't live in second guessing those things. I think it's pretty clear that the tailwinds in our market are all behind us. Mobile technology is growing like crazy. Millennials aren't reading the newspaper. They're certainly not taking those little pieces of paper they get handed on the way out of the grocery store. So time is on our side, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, and plus what I've learned is that if you just keep churning and keep moving forward, good things continue to happen. Time and market is valuable. Size of your user base helps people return your phone calls. So, I guess what I would say is that I'm not in the market to flip our company and I have nothing else to do. I mean, what would I do? I'd go figure out some other great idea, but it's not gonna be this good probably. So, yeah, I mean, there's no like I need to hit this button and go have this secondary round and start selling off my shares. I firmly believe in what we're doing and building, and so I try not to even fantasize about those types of exits. You have to have a good answer to articulate how there could be one, because there has to be some notion of liquidity at the end of this rainbow. But I think it's pretty clear that the value that we create for other partners, whether it's a Nielsen or IRI, whether it's a PayPal, Facebook, Google, Amazon, is pretty obvious in my opinion, that they're looking to activate people to be in on the economic transaction. The closer you are to economic transactions, the more monetizable your service. There's 3 types of businesses that make money in tech. There's free utility that later injects ads into the experience, Facebook, irritating, and very hard to get to 1 trillion users to compete with Facebook. There's freemium, Spotify, LinkedIn, free version, paid version. Okay, it's a good model, but you got to get people from the free to the paid. That's a nice recurring revenue business if you have a great. And there's what we do, which is you're in on every economic transaction. That's Amazon, that's PayPal. Those are the best businesses in my opinion, because you are able, just like investment bankers, you just take a tiny little bit out of every transaction and all of a sudden you're making lots of money. So I think it's some thought goes into which of those 3 buckets you want to be in. You can win big in any of the 3. I like our bucket.
Cool.
Good question.
Our primary source of revenue is on a fee per unit sold basis, so a commission that Coca-Cola pays us per unit they sell, that Burger King pays us per every time someone spends $10, that Best Buy pays us when you spend $100. If you spend $100 or more at Best Buy, you the consumer get $10, and we get about $10, right? So our fee is per sale, performance based. At the same time, we do have some payments providers that give us an incentive to allow users to convert their earnings into their currency. So we're about to launch a major partnership with Venmo. Venmo is a new mobile payments provider. They're actually incentivizing our users to try Venmo, and we get some benefits from that. There's something called a distribution commission. So if you buy a $5 gift card at Starbucks or at Target or whatever, that doesn't actually cost us $5. So there's a break that you get. That break between the face value and what you pay is another incentive source. It's not a primary source of revenue. We have other arrangements from which we derive revenue, but the primary one is pay per sale. So our incentive is to drive a sale. We use push notifications. We use geo-based technologies. We use other techniques. We're smart about personalizing communications and so forth, because we don't get paid for getting you to print out a coupon or getting you to clip a coupon like coupons.com does. We sell in against that model as essentially misalignment of incentives between the client and the vendor. And therefore, our consumer doesn't get anything unless she buys a product. Our brand doesn't pay us anything unless the product is purchased. That's a completely different thesis than what is out there today. And so it's been fun being opposite coupons.com at a conference, and they're saying, oh, isn't it great? We're moving from paper coupons to digital coupons. Woohoo! And we're sitting there saying, digital coupons are a complete waste of your time and money. The whole coupon paradigm needs to die and go away forever, because it's a purely transactional relationship. There's no interaction. There's no loyalty building. There's no engagement. You get nothing. You're not building a repeat purchase over time because you didn't say anything about what your brand is. You don't want to be locked in a perpetual cycle of eroding the price and margin of your product. That's what coupons do. Coupons are terrible for like 20 other reasons, but it's fun to be the only voice out there criticizing the entire paradigm. In our view, taking a weekly circular paper coupon and putting it onto a phone is like running a radio ad on television in 1945. You can do it, and the first ad ever is, it just comes on the screen and it says, America runs on Boulevard time. And then it shuts. $9 million that ad costs in today's dollars. That was what that's where their brain went. They took the old advertising, put it on the new medium, and called it good. That's what's going on mobile phones right now. We call it a waste of a perfectly good smartphone. So we're out there making the point that slapping a temporary price reduction onto a phone is completely unimaginative, and it's fun to go after a $2 billion company like coupons.com and win every single time with that argument. That's really, really fun for me, as you probably tell from, yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, well, so by making money, you mean cash flow positive. We're making money by my other definition of making money, which is that we have millions of dollars of revenue. We're still pre-cash flow positive. We're close, but we're not there yet. We're investing aggressively in our growth and our user growth, precluding entrance into the market. And our business is one where, given the economics of our product, you don't need a lot of active users in order to make money as a company. So that's those three buckets I mentioned. If you're going to be in ads, you need trillions of users. If you're going to be in freemium, not so much, because each user's subscription is a recurring $100 a year. And in our model, it's more like that second bucket, where a small group of heavily active consumers can really generate a lot of profit for our company. So we're privately held. That's about as much information as I usually disclose. But we've raised money on the valuations we've raised it on, because I think there's a strong conviction that once in any two-sided market, once you get a lot of advertising partners, it creates a better product, even more retention of users, and then that community growing creates more excitement among advertisers, and it creates a very large barrier to entry for would-be entrants. So you got to get to this critical mass, and then the cost of acquiring users goes down, the value per user goes up, and it's a very exciting kind of reinforcing virtuous cycle. And we're right at that point right now, which is why we're hiring as many good people as we can possibly find. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to stop right now.
Yeah, well, I'm not going anywhere.
Well,
So you can
I'm
check.
not gonna. We have a little more time later, but what I'd like to do at this point in time is thank Bryan for
Thanks for
being
having
here
me.
this evening. I really appreciate it very much. And also thank the folks that helped out again, the kids, folks from Warren Tech, folks from Noble Productions. Thank you very much.
Woohoo!
All right. So we have a little more time later to mingle out there, and Bryan, you're going to stick around, I think, for a little while longer.
Yeah.
And
I'll be happy to.
just so let you know, again, if you were interested in participating in the next couple of events, go to the Meetup Startup Grind site or to the Meetup site and sign up. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Yeah.